Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah Muhammad ibn Abdullah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'a hudah, amma ba'd. Your Excellency Professor Dr. Zaglul Muhammad An-Najjar, Your Excellency Mr. Ambassador of Republic of Egypt Mr. Ahmad Al-Qushni, Your Excellency the Head of Middle East and Islamic Studies Program, Postgraduate Program, University of Indonesia, ladies and gentlemen, the participants of this lecture series, we have a great pleasure today to welcome Professor Dr. Zaglul An-Najjar, who is Muslim scholar and well known in Arabic world and Islamic world as the expert in the field of scientific notion in the glorious Al-Quran. Ladies and gentlemen, to shorten the time, we will please Mr. Ambassador, His Excellency will give a brief about Mr. Zaglul An-Najjar and will give a message to us as the participant in this lecture series. I please Mr. Ambassador.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are pleased and honored to be invited by you to come to meet you here. As a matter of fact, as an ambassador of Egypt here for more than 2 years now, I came to this wonderful university before in a talk about the Middle East. Today, I was accompanied today with Professor Dr. Zaglul An-Najjar. He is one of the elite in Egypt. It is an example of the mind and heart of Egypt. He is a professor and also expert and achieving a breakthrough in giving us an updated tafsir, interpretation of 1,200 ayat verses in Quran related to the universe, earth, sun, moon, skies, sea, mountains, earthquakes, everything. So, after we have achieved a very huge scientific advancement, and we are capable and able now to understand lots of what we have never understood this way, because those who gave us the interpretation before were limited by their senses. Now we know, and we know better what does it mean. I wish that you could get the best of him, and I also looking forward to hear a discussion about what he's going to. This is something new. If we use this in da'wah to Islam through our glorious Quran, this will be a message from us to the intellectuals in the West, that they may believe that Quran is really glorious. It has all the notions about the universe and I hope you will. I'm also looking forward maybe to hear from you after this lecture. How did you receive it and how you look at it? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for his words. And ladies and gentlemen, our topic today in this lecture series is scientific notions in the glorious of Al-Quran Al-Karim. Al-Ijazul Ilmi fil Quran Al-Karim, or we say in Indonesia, mukjizat ilmu pengetahuan di dalam Al-Quran. First of all, we will give the time to Your Excellency Professor Dr. Zaglul Al-Najjar to give his lecture, and after that we will open the session to take your questions and your response to the lecture. And I please Your Excellency Professor Dr. Zaglul Al-Najjar to give your lecture.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Your Excellency, the Ambassador of the Egyptian Arab Republic, the distinguished professors and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I greet you all in our Islamic way. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
May Allah's peace, blessings and mercy be with you all. Before I start my discussion with you, I would like to emphasize the fact that the glorious Quran is the only form of divine guidance within the hands of man today that has been kept intact in exactly the same language of revelation, the Arabic language, preserved by the will of Allah, word to word and letter to letter. And no other revelation has enjoyed that very precise form of preservation. And one would ask why the Quran was preserved and the Bible or the Torah or the Psalms of David or the books of Abraham were not preserved. To answer this, I dare say that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the last of that long chain of messengers from God to man, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the glorious Quran tells us وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. We were not to punish without sending a warner. And if the Quran was lost, then Allah will have no case against his own people. So the mere preservation of the glorious Quran in exactly the same language of revelation, the Arabic language, is a miracle by itself and is a testimony to the unity of the divine guidance to man. Inna ad-dina inda Allah al-Islam. Verily the religion with Allah is al-Islam. Allah will never accept any religion other than al-Islam. And of course we respect and honor the freedom of man to believe in whatever he or she would like. But of course we have to tell people that the only form of divine guidance within the hands of man today that has been kept intact in exactly the same language of revelation, the Arabic language, preserved by the will of Allah, word to word and letter to letter, is the glorious Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anybody at any time, at any place, who would like to know the true religion, he or she should read the Quran, even in a translation, and judge for himself or herself whether this is the word of God or the word of man. The Quran is basically a book of guidance to man in areas that cannot be clearly addressed by man, such as the area of faith, the area of acts of worship, the area of the moral code, and the area of the code of transactions with others. If we discuss any of these areas, we can see in them a clear-cut criterion that can testify to the fact that this book cannot be the work of man. It's the divine word in its divine purity. Yet we find, besides these four basic foundations, we find more than 1,200 cosmic verses. And these cosmic verses did not come down as pieces of scientific information per se, because science cannot be gained by man in one go. Man needs to look, to meditate, to observe, to conclude, to carry out an experiment, to observe the results of experimentation, and finally to conclude. So we can clearly say that these cosmic verses in the glorious Quran came down as a testimony to the might, knowledge, and wisdom of the Creator. They come down to testify to the unity of that Creator without parallels, partners, or similars. It came down to testify to the fact that the Creator is highly exalted above all His creation. None of His creation would look like Him. He, or glory be to Him, is above both space and time, both matter and energy, and we cannot say about our Creator except what He has said about Himself. ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير. Nothing in His creation would ever look like Him. Allah is above space and time, above matter and energy, is exalted above all His creation, and we can only accept what He has described Himself by. These cosmic verses come also in the context of testifying to the fact that whoever has created has got the capacity to annihilate his creation and to resurrect everything again. And the area of resurrection has always been highly debated by materialistic attitudes. Thirdly, I do believe that these cosmic verses in the Quran are an address to the people of our time. We are in a time of great scientific and technological advances, and if you talk to people about religion, about the domain of the unseen, they always ask for the scientific proof. Of course, I cannot prove religion scientifically. Religion is above the human capacity. But if I can prove the correct scientific notion in the Quran, this correctness can be taken as a testimony to the correctness of the domain of the unseen mentioned in the glorious Quran. That's why at the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter, second surah in the Quran, we read, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. Allah is highly praising those who believe in the world of the unseen. Today I'm addressing a very critical topic, and this critical topic is the fact that or before I discuss the topic, I would like to say that there are three terms in Arabic language that Arabs use as synonyms for each other, while they are not synonyms. They are three successive stages. We have as-sa'ah, the last hour. We have al-qiyamah, resurrection. And we have al-akhirah, the last day. Most exegesis of the Quran use these three terms as synonyms, while they are not. They are three successive stages in the destruction and the resurrection of that universe. Of course, resurrection and akhirah, the last day, are 100% in the domain of the unseen. The last hour can be judged by the laws of this universe. So I will address you this afternoon about the scientific precision of the Quranic description of the last hour. And if I can have the first slide, inshallah. Yeah. Could we lower the light in the first row a little bit so that people can see clearly? Just lower the lighting in the first two rows. Yes, barakallah fikum. You see, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is quoted to have said, "Man sarrahu an yanzura ila yawm al-qiyamah ka'annahu ra'ya al-ayn falyaqra idha ash-shamsu kuwirat wa idha as-sama'u infatarat wa idha as-sama'u shaqqat." These are three chapters of the Quran. Whoever would like to see how this universe is going to be destroyed should read these three chapters. In Surah Al-Takwir, we read, إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ وَإِذَا النُّجُومُ انْكَدَرَتْ. These two verses are two scientific facts that were not known until the end of the 20th century. إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ, one would ask, when the sun is wound round, isn't the sun round today? We see the sun round from the earth because of the great distance between the earth and the sun. The distance between the earth and the sun is in the order of 150 million kilometers. Because of this vast distance, we see the sun as a rounded entity. But when the sun was photographed from a closer distance, we could see that it's not round. You see, this is the sun as we see it from the earth, a perfect sphere, a perfect globe. But when we came closer to the sun, we came to see that emanations from the sun can extend for several thousands of kilometers. You see these arms coming out from the sun. Actually, it's not a perfect sphere. These solar emanations can reach the earth. Actually, can reach the earth 150 million kilometers. And these emanations are a testimony for the activity in the sun. The sun is like any other star, is a nuclear furnace in which a process of nuclear fusion is taking place. As a result of that fusion, we get these great emanations from the sun, these great arms coming from the sun. So the sun is currently not a sphere. How the sun will be changed into a sphere? If the nuclear reaction in the core of the sun would fade down a little bit, these arms will be withdrawn inside the sun, and it will become a perfect sphere. We never knew this fact until the sun was photographed from a shorter distance, and we came to realize that the sun is actually a huge nuclear furnace wherein a process called the nuclear fusion is constantly taking place, and this process generates all the elements and all the energy needed for life in the solar system. So when these arms will be withdrawn down, this is a sign of the last hour, the beginning of the destruction of the universe. And this was told by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or in the Quran, of course, 14 centuries ago. Nobody knew this until the last few decades in the 20th century. You can see now the explosion of this nuclear fusion. It can send these arms to more than 150 million kilometers. You see now some of the arms of the sun coming out as a result of this fusion in the heart of the sun. And this fusion can cause the core of the sun to be at 15 million degrees centigrade to 20 million degrees centigrade. The surface of the sun, 6,000 degrees centigrade. And the emanations from the sun, 1 to 2 million degrees centigrade. So the sun is not now a perfect sphere. It will become perfectly spherical during the last hour. And the last hour is the phase during which this universe starts to be completely destroyed. You see, this arm can almost reach the earth. This arm coming from the sun can exceed 150 million kilometers. There's, of course, drawings for the sun, and you can see these emanations, these solar emanations, cannot allow the sun currently to be a perfect sphere. You see these emanations? This is a filter, because if you look to the sun directly, one can lose his eyesight completely. You see, these emanations extend from the sun for actually 150 million kilometers or even more. You see these emanations coming from the sun? So it's not a perfect sphere. You see, when the sun is activated, it sends these emanations. It can actually reach the earth. And you can see here, this is the earth. And you see the emanation is coming. Unless Allah has caused several shelters for the earth. This is the earth. several shelters for the earth, these emanations could burn the earth completely. And that's why the Quran is saying, إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ, when the sun will be made into a perfect sphere. The Prophet ﷺ is also quoted to have said, الشمس والقمر يكوران يوم القيامة. Both the sun and the moon will be rounded on the day of resurrection, on the day of judgment. How come, you see, the sun and the earth will be rounded, you see? The sun and the moon, sorry. The moon is a perfect sphere. We have landed on the moon, and the moon is the closest heavenly body to us, and we know that the moon is a perfect sphere. Why did the Prophet ﷺ say the sun and the moon will be perfectly rounded on the last day or the last hour? I will tell you the answer to this in a minute. But the second verse in the surah, Surah Al-Takwir, says, وَإِذَا النُّجُومُ انْكَدَرَتْ, and when the stars fade out. Nowadays we realize that the very important character of a star is its degree of luminosity. The degree of luminosity of a star would tell us its temperature, its mass, its chemical composition, its density, its speed of rotation around its own axis, its speed of running in its own orbit. So one of the most important criteria of a star is its degree of luminosity. And we see today stars being born, being created out of smoke, and of passing through successive stages, childhood, youthfulness, maturity, old age, and dying out. And the very first phase of a star to die out is fading out its luminosity, losing gradually its luminosity. This is a very recent fact that was only recognized in the last decades of the 20th century, and for the glorious Quran to spell it out that clearly, وَإِذَا النُّجُومُ انْكَدَرَتْ, when the stars will fade out. Yeah, this is a scientific precision that can testify to the truthfulness of the glorious Quran and the truthfulness of the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One of the fading, can you listen to this sound? The Quran has described this phase in the life history of a star and called it At-Tariq. At-Tariq means the knocker, the knocking star. And we have a chapter in the Quran called At-Tariq. You see, this is a phase of fading out of a star losing its luminosity. And the matter here condenses very highly so that you can have a density of 1 billion tons to a cubic centimeter. 1,000 million tons for a cubic centimeter. If a single cubic centimeter of this star would fall on the earth, it would destroy the earth completely. Scientists have called this star a neutron star or a pulsar, from the pulse of the heart. But if you see here the noise is not pulsing. This is not pulsation. This is knocking, exactly as if somebody is knocking at a wooden or an iron door. So the Quranic terminology is more precise and more accurate than any scientific terminology of the day. The Quran describes this neutron star as At-Tariq, the knocking star. And this star, as I said, it is a phase in the fading out of a star, in the dying out of a star. The material is highly condensed in the core of the star so that the negative electrons can join the positive positrons and change the whole thing into a neutral body. And this neutron star is the very first phase of fading out a star. It loses lots of its luminosity, and of course it generates radio waves, as you can see it. It's a small star, 18 to 20 kilometers in diameter, and it generates an immense quantity of radio waves. And these radio waves can knock our star in exactly the same way of somebody knocking at a wooden or an iron door. So the scientific terminology in the Quran is more precise and more accurate than present-day astronomy. Although we know that astronomy is one of the most highly advanced sciences of our time. This is an exploding star, a star that is dying out, and it creates in the core of it a neutron star or a knocking star. This is the Crab Nebula, one of the closest nebulae nearer to our solar system, and we can see in that nebula, which is mainly a gaseous body, smoky body, we can see stars are being created and others are dying out. This is a knocking star that we can still receive its noise up until today. This knocking star was observed several centuries ago, and you can still hear the sound of its radio waves that knock our globe. And that's why the Quranic notion وَإِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ وَإِذَا النُّجُومُ انْكَدَرَتْ is emphasizing the fact that the very first stage in the dying out of a star is its sphericity. The star loses its radiation. The second phase is losing its luminosity, degree of luminosity, and this is the knocking star. And then finally the Quran says فَإِذَا النُّجُومُ طُمِسَتْ, when the stars are completely dimmed, no light can come out from a star, and when the heaven is cleft asunder, فَإِذَا النُّجُومُ طُمِسَتْ وَإِذَا السَّمَاءُ فُرِجَتْ. The last phase in some of the giant stars that are several times the mass of the sun is to change finally into what we call a black hole. And a black hole cannot be seen. And that's why the Quran says, فَإِذَا النُّجُومُ طُمِسَتْ, when the stars are completely dimmed. Black holes were only discovered in the late 70s, early 80s of the 20th century. For a book revealed 14 centuries ago to an unlettered Prophet ﷺ in an unlettered society to speak about these stages, which were only discovered in the last few decades of the 20th century, is a scientific miracle that can easily testify to any sane person that the Quran cannot be the word of man. It's the divine word in its divine purity. This is the black hole. You see, the black hole is a tiny spot which cannot be seen. It has got what we call an event horizon around it. Any form of matter or energy that would enter that event horizon, which is several hundred kilometers in diameter, would be swallowed immediately, would disappear completely. And we could see or recognize the black holes not only because we see them, we don't see them, but we can see شكرا لكم شكرا لك بارك الله فيك شكرا. You see, we can see many X-rays moving towards this black spot, and that's why the black holes were discovered. I see. So the Quran, a book revealed more than 14 centuries ago to an unlettered prophet in an unlettered society, would speak about successive stages in the dying out of a star, being completely rounded, changing into a knocking star, and finally into a black hole. These are the three successive stages that have been recently discovered in astronomy for a dying star. Shukran. Here we can see a black hole pulling a stream of X-rays from a star it cannot swallow, it cannot absorb. So by these directions of X-ray coming from all directions, we can define the position of a black hole. Again, this is the black hole. This is the event horizon. This event horizon is several hundreds of thousands of kilometers in diameter. Any form of matter or energy entering into that event horizon would be swallowed immediately. And that's how black holes were discovered. Otherwise, we can never see them. And that's why the Quran says, فَإِذَا النُّجُومُ طُمِسَتْ, when stars are completely dimmed. This is a black hole. This is the event horizon. And this is a chain of electrons that are being pulled from a distant star it cannot swallow completely. The Quran reads, وَإِذَا الْبِحَارُ سُجِّرَتْ, and when the seas shall become as blazing fire or shall overflow. Recently, it was discovered that all oceans of our time are established on a base that's deeply rifted, and these rifts are 65 kilometers to 150 kilometers in width. Under the crust we find a zone of semi-molten material, and this semi-molten material can ooze out in millions of tons that can keep all the oceans of the time and some of the seas physically set on a blaze. This is mentioned in Surah Al-Tur when the Quran reads, وَالْبَحْرِ الْمَسْجُورِ. Allah is giving an oath by the sea that's physically set on a blaze, because this is one of the greatest signs of the knowledge of Allah, the might of Allah, that water and fire would meet at the bottoms of all oceans of the time and some of its seas. Neither the water can quench that fire completely, nor that fire can evaporate that water completely. That balance is one of the natural signs that has created havoc amidst many of the science of the time. Neither this water can quench that fire completely, nor that fire can evaporate that water completely. But the verse we are with today, وَإِذَا الْبِحَارُ سُجِّرَتْ, there's something in the future. This means one of the signs of Akhirah is that all the oceans of the time and most of the seas will be physically set on a blaze. Allah will open this wide apart, simply, and all the oceans will be completely set on a blaze. The water can be completely evaporated, and that's why the Quran says, وَإِذَا الْبِحَارُ سُجِّرَتْ. So one of the signs of the last hour is that all the oceans on the surface of the globe will be physically set on a blaze. I've got a documentary for you. It testifies to the fact that our current oceans are physically set on a blaze. A volcanic activity at the bottoms of all the oceans of the time and some of the seas can testify to this fact that all the oceans are actually physically set on a blaze. And this is one of the great miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the sea cools down with depth, and to warm the water a little bit for life, Allah has created these volcanoes to give the life at the bottoms of oceans and seas a certain degree of warmth, and that's why you find life abounding around the volcanic vents, as you were seeing. You see, volcanic eruption at the bottom of the sea. See, volcanic vent at the bottom of the sea. And you get the fire coming out. Neither this immense quantity of water can quench that fire completely, nor that fire at 1000 degrees centigrade can evaporate the oceanic water completely. And this balance is one of the testimonies of the might, knowledge, and wisdom of the Creator. You see, the sea is physically set on a blaze. That's why Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is quoted to have said, لا يركب البحر إلا حاج أو معتمر أو غاز في سبيل الله فإن تحت البحر نارا وتحت النار بحرا. You see, the sea should not be ridden except for a major event, because under the sea there is fire, and under the fire there is water. And Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam never rode the sea even for once in his lifetime. For him to spell that out is one of his miracles, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You see, all the oceans of the time and many of the seas are physically set on a blaze. An ancient Arab poet used to say, ومكلف الأيام ضد طباعها متطلب في الماء جذوة ناري. Whoever would like to force the days to behave in his own way, as if he is seeking a piece of fire in the water body. And actually fire is in the water body now, and this is not something difficult really for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a marine geologist who is trying to get a sample from these volcanic eruptions under the sea, because volcanic rocks coming under the sea are completely different from volcanic rocks coming on the surface of the earth. And we can prove to people that these volcanic rocks are coming underwater because they have a particular chemical and mineralogical composition that is different from volcanic rocks emanated on the surface of the earth. And that's why this man is trying to get a sample to prove to people that this is a volcanic eruption under the sea. I have 3 different documentaries like this, but I don't want to waste your time. I think this is quite enough. This is an actual photograph to the bottom of the ocean. An actual photograph to the bottom of the ocean. Physically set on a blaze. والبحر المسجور. And in the last hour, this of course can infill the ocean basins completely. This is another film, I don't want to show it. The Quran says, وَجُمِعَ الشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ. And when the moon will join, the sun and the moon will join together. And secular scientists were really screaming their heads off. How could Muhammad tell us that the moon and the sun will join together? For billions of years, the moon has been remaining in its position and the sun has been remaining in its position. How will the sun and the moon join together? When the astronauts reach the moon, they put a huge mirror on the surface of the moon, and with laser beams they can calculate the distance of the moon to the earth to the minute fractions, to parts of a millimeter. And for their surprise, American astronomers came to realize that the moon is drifting away from us at a speed of 3 to 4 centimeters every year. So logic would say that definitely this drifting away of the moon will force the moon to be swallowed by the sun. But the sun will not swallow the moon by this process. It will swallow the moon by the divine instruction, be and it will be. But Allah, out of His own mercy, would leave these signs for us to believe in the Quranic descriptions of the signs of the last hour. وَجُمِعَ الشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ, when the sun and the moon will be joined together. And when the Prophet ﷺ said, الشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ يُكَوَّرَانِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ, we know that the moon currently is a perfect sphere. But when the sun swallows the moon, and the sun will be rounded, the material of the moon will be rounded as well. And that's why the Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, الشمس والقمر يكوران يوم القيامة. You see, many people think that the earth is revolving around the sun in a plane. And this is not true. Actually, every second of our existence, we are in a different place in the universe. Every second, we are in a different place. And that's why we see this, you see, first year, second year, third year, and so on. Yani we are moving all the time. And due to the great magnitude of the orbit of the sun, it looks like a straight line. Because the sun can complete a single revolution in 250 million years. 250 million years. The sun will complete a complete revolution around the central part of the galaxy to testify to the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, everything in the universe is revolving in a helical manner, not in a plane, in a helical manner. So that the relationship of these heavenly bodies are kept constant. And we see here the moon revolving around the earth. Of course, not in a plane, it's in a helical form. So everything is moving in a helical form. And of course, we can see that if the moon is drifting away from us at the rate of 3 to 4 centimeters, definitely the sun will swallow it one day. It will be completely engulfed by the sun. And you can see the various stages of the moon as it revolves around the sun. The Quran reads, فَإِذَا انشَقَّتِ السَّمَاءُ فَكَانَتْ وَرْدَةً كَالدِّهَانِ. When the heaven is cleft asunder and becomes like an oily red rose. This is how the stars explode today. An oily red rose, exactly as the Quran describes it. فَإِذَا انشَقَّتِ السَّمَاءُ فَكَانَتْ وَرْدَةً كَالدِّهَانِ. Wallahi, I found American astronomers writing on that image an oily red rose, exactly as the Quran describes it. فإن انشقت السماء فكانت وردة كالدهان. And the Quran says, إذا السماء انفطرت وإذا الكواكب انتثرت. I will leave the first ayah and look at وإذا الكواكب انتثرت. Look at the scientific precision of a book revealed more than 14 centuries ago to an unlettered prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in an unlettered society. The Quran describes the fate of stars, rounding, then dimming, then complete obliteration of the light. Qadrat losing part of its shining, and then complete dimming. And when it comes to planets, it says وَإِذَا الْكَوَاكِبُ انْتَثَرَتْ. When the heavens is cleft asunder and when the planets have been scattered to pieces. And this is exactly what we observe today. Planets are mainly solid bodies. They are rocky bodies. Once they explode, they change into meteors and meteorites. You see, and these are actually scattered away in the outer space. Some of it can reach the Earth, some can reach other planets. Look at the precision. The end of planets is explosion and scattering. The end of stars is rounding, dimming, and completely losing its glittering or its light. Wallahi, nobody could understand this. Yani 50 years ago, only 50 years ago, nobody could understand it. We see now some of these meteors and meteorites reaching the Earth. You see, traveling, reaching, coming as an explosion of a planet reaching our Earth. You see, the Earth is bombarded every year by 1 to 2 million tons of these meteors and meteorites. So the end of planets is explosion and scattering. The end of stars is rounding, losing its glitter, and complete dimming. How precise could the Quran be? Wallahi, no scientist, no astronomer knew these facts except 30, 40 years ago. For the Quran to spell this out is a living testimony that this is the word of God subhanahu wa ta'ala, the word of the Creator in its divine purity. You see some of these meteors and meteorites reaching the Earth. If the solid body is burned completely in outer space, it's a meteor. If a solid part reaches the Earth, it's called a meteorite. The Earth is bombarded annually by millions of these meteors and meteorites. Here we find the solar system. Our solar system is mainly here, and surrounded by these meteoric bodies to close the solar system completely. It finishes, it's called the Oort cloud, closes the solar system completely. This is one of these iron meteoric bodies. One of these meteoric bodies came down in southern part of Sudan, in Juba, and it was 90 tons of pure iron. 90 tons of pure iron, you see. And the Quran speaks about sending down iron. And it has been scientifically proved that all the iron in our Earth and in our solar system was actually physically sent down to us, not originally from the Earth. Another meteoric body. And some of these meteorites can create a depression in the Earth half a kilometer deep. Half a kilometer deep. Yeah. The Quran reads, إذا السماء انشقت وأذنت لربها وحقت. When the heaven is split asunder. And we only came to understand this after a very thorough study of the structure of the universe. We could see that gravity simulates iron bars connecting the heavenly bodies together. Really, this is a very, very precise construction. If these gravity lines were broken, the whole thing will collapse. And that's why the Quran describes the last hour to take action in a flash. Really, in a flash, everything will be destroyed. If these lines would break up, the whole thing will collapse. And that's why the Quran always speaks about إذا السماء انشقت, إذا السماء انفطرت, وفتحت السماء فكانت أبوابا, and so on. We only came to realize this very, very recently. Otherwise, people thought that the universe is emptiness. And they used to talk about outer space as an empty body. You see, it's not empty at all. Matter and energy fill all the place, and all the heavenly bodies are interconnected with these gravity lines. وفتحت السماء فكانت أبوابا وسيرت الجبال فكانت سرابا. And the heaven shall be opened, becoming as gateways, and the mountains shall be moved away from their places in the form of a mirage. Scientists today speak about 5 main aspects of forces. We have the weak atomic force, the strong nuclear force. We have the electromagnetism or electricity and magnetism, and we have gravity. And they try to join these 5 forces in one form, which they call the supergravity, الجاذبية العظمى. The supergravity has got a unit called the graviton. And you could imagine if the rocks of mountains were set apart, if this gravity is broken down by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these rocks will flow like a mirage, will flow like woolen particles that have been set apart. يوم تكون الجبال كالعهن المنفوش. You see, and here وفتحت السماء فكانت أبوابا وسيرت الجبال فكانت سرابا. Simply by loosening the binding force to these objects, everything will flow like a mirage. This is the construction of a galaxy similar to ours, containing billions of heavenly bodies controlled by gravity. The only thing between is gravity. If you break the gravity lines, everything will collapse. Here are some of these galaxies, again controlled by gravity lines. Scientists today simulate the binding force in the nucleus of a carbon atom with the binding force in a great galaxy like ours. this is a spiral galaxy similar to ours. And they say the binding force in the nucleus of a carbon atom is exactly similar to the binding force that joins together billions of heavenly bodies in a spiral galaxy like ours. I'll skip this. The Quran says, إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها. Only recently we came to understand this verse, because the average density of the rocks of the continents we are living on is about 2.7 gram per centimeter cube. The density of ocean bottom rocks at the ocean bottom are about 3 grams per centimeter cube. But the average density of the total Earth is 5.5 grams per cubic centimeter. This means that the material of the Earth increases in density towards its core. And nowadays we know that the Earth has got a solid inner core, mainly composed of iron and nickel, with an average density about 13 to 14 grams per centimeter cube. And the Quran says, really, more than 14 centuries ago, إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها, when the Earth will throw out its heaviest parts. Early commentators of the Quran said أثقالها here means the dead bodies. But of course I think this is overdoing it, you see. Actually, physically, it's the inner core of the Earth would come out. This is the Earth. You see, when you see the movement of the plates against each other, we find one going under the other. This is the overriding plate. This is the descending plate. We can see this descending plate can create volcanicity and can release some of this material upwardly. And this movement can create earthquakes and volcanic activity and will never stop until a mountain chain is built. And we can see that this material coming out is much heavier in density than the material in the continental masses. We see the inner core of the Earth. This is mainly composed of 90% iron, 9% nickel, and 1% light materials. This is a molten outer core having the same composition. Then the percentage of iron is gradually reduced from here to become 5.6% in the crust of the Earth. So the heavy parts of the Earth are in the core of the Earth. Quran reads, كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا, nay, when the earth is crushed down to nothing. And we can see in current earthquakes how everything is being crushed. See, everything is being crushed down. And the last hour actually, or the earthquakes of the last hour, will be much greater than the earthquakes of our own time. See, everything is crumbled, everything is broken, everything is dumped down. And of course, the earthquakes of the last hour would be much more severe and much more devastating than the earthquakes of our lifetime. The Quran reads, يوم تكون السماء كالمهل, the day that the sky will be like the boiling filth of oil, or like a molten magma. This is the sky when all the stars die out. It'll become like this, a molten filth of oil. السماء منفطر به يوم ترجف الأرض والجبال وكانت الجبال كثيبا مهيلة وحملت الأرض والجبال فدكتا دكة واحدة فيومئذ وقعت الواقعة وانشقت السماء فهي يومئذ واهية. As I said earlier, if you break down the binding force of rocks, they will fly like mirage. If you break down the binding forces of heavenly bodies, everything will collapse, and so on. So the last hour will witness all these changes. I'll skip this. Allah says, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنْ جِبَالٍ فَقُلْ يَنْسِفُهَا رَبِّي نَسْفًا فيذرها قاعا صفصفا لا ترى فيها عوجا ولا أمتا. The address is to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the Quran reads, and they ask you about the mountains, then say, my Lord will blast them and scatter them as particles of dust. Then he shall leave them as a leveled, smooth plain, so that you cannot see in it any folding or elevated parts. Actually, mountains are formed either by folding or by rifting. And for the Quran to spell that out that clearly is a miracle by itself. Just go quickly. This is folding of mountains. We can see mountains compressed to make anticlines and synclines. Or they can be made by faulting. As we can see here, we can see a fault plane. See, this line here is a fault. This folding and this is faulting. And that's how mountains are being formed. And the Quran, a book revealed more than 14 centuries ago, speaks about the two major processes of mountain building, either by folding or by faulting. I think that I have many other examples, but I don't want to take you too long. I'll stop here, hoping that they could follow me and you could have gotten something about the scientific precision of the glorious Quran, even in the description of the last hour. هذا ما عندي وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. شكرا لفضيلة الأستاذ الدكتور زغلول النجار على محاضرته القيمة. ونحن سنفتح بعد هذا جلسة أو حصة لتلقي التساؤلات من المحاضرين. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Zaghlul An-Najjar has shown to us how precise and how accurate the terminology of the Al-Quran with the fact of scientific notion. I quote once more, Al-Quran scientific terminology is more precise and more accurate to any present terminology of the scientific, from astronomy to geology to the other fields of the science. And we have to note that this is had been said 14 centuries ago, from the unlettered prophet to unlettered society. And all this show to us that Al-Quran is right, is haq, as the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know to give you the opportunity to give response, to ask some question to Professor His Excellency Professor Zaghlul An-Najjar. And at the first session I will give to 3 persons maybe. One of you will give response. Please state your name. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I will take your question in 3 languages, in Arabic, English, or in Indonesian language. Please.
Who's asking? Yeah.
And I help Mr. Aziz to translate to Arabic from Indonesia, okay?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Saya tadi belum begitu paham yang disampaikan, tapi saya mau tanya, ada salah satu ayat di dalam Al-Quran kalau nggak salah menyatakan bumi itu sebagai gunung itu sebagai penguat bumi. Nah, itu apa maksudnya? Kemudian yang kedua, kenapa Allah menciptakan alam semesta demikian besar, padahalnya ada makhluk manusia di dalam bumi yang begitu kecilnya? Terima kasih.
طب خلينا نجاوب سؤال. You see the Quran speaks about mountains in almost 40 Quranic verses, and I had some illustrations. I went very quickly over it. We can see when a plate moves against another plate. You see, we can see a continent moving another continent. One goes under the other. This movement can never stop until a mountain chain is being built. And of course, when the mountain chain is built, every mountain has got a deep root. And this deep root is 10 to 15 times the elevation of the mountain on earth. And with this deep root, it can bind the two places together and the movement can stop. And that's why the Quran tells us about the great bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us by stabilizing the earth with mountains. وَالْجِبَالَ أَرْسَاهَا مَتَاعًا لَكُمْ وَلِأَنْعَامِكُمْ. And by mountains, Allah has stabilized the earth as a bounty for you and your cattle. وَأَلْقَى فِي الْأَرْضِ رَوَاسِيَ أَنْ تَمِيدَ بِكُمْ. And Allah has thrown down stabilizers, meaning mountains, lest it should shake with you. And Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is quoted to have said, عندما خلق الله الأرض جعل التميد فأرساها بالجبال. When Allah created the earth, it started to shake and jerk. Then Allah stabilized it with mountains. So mountains are the stabilizers of the earth. No.
It's clear.
Allah has created the earth as a big entity because Allah knows in His eternal knowledge that the population is going to be many. We are now 7 billion human beings on earth. And the earth has become really too small for us, you see. And the second earth from which will be resurrected will be much larger, inshallah. Will be much larger. Nah.
Thank you, Professor.
Barakallahu fiikum.
Saya ingin menyapa para audiens di Universitas Riau. Apakah Anda mendengar kami di Jakarta? Saya persilakan. I place you from University of Riau in Sumatra. Maybe one of you will give a question to Professor Zaglul Al-Najjar. I give you opportunity. Anda bisa menyampaikan pertanyaan dalam bahasa Arab, bahasa Indonesia, dan bahasa Inggris.
Okay, there's one question, and the question is from Mr. Harry. Please.
أين الذي يسأل؟
State your name, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Di sini ini tema yang sangat menarik sekali. Bahwasanya di sini diketahui bahwasanya bahwa bumi dan matahari kemudian dan pergerakan yang lainnya itu semua ada di dalam Al-Quran Karim kan itu. Nah kemudian yang di sini yang saya tanyakan bagaimana tadi kan dijelaskan bahwasanya rotasi antara perputaran bumi gitu kan, perputaran bumi terhadap matahari itu kan kalau menurut teori kan bahwasanya kelamaan itu kan lemah gitu ya. Nah, nanti ketika diimplementasikan ketika kiamat itu sehingga antara planet satu dengan planet lain itu saling bertabrakan dan sebagainya. Bagaimana penjelasannya di dalam Al-Quran itu? Terima kasih.
قد شرحت الأرض والشمس وحركتها موجودة في القرآن وكيف تقوير الأرض والشمس وحتى في يوم القيامة كلها
تخاصم واحد يعني مع بعض كده. اتفضل.
أنا لم أقل الأرض والشمس، أنا قلت الشمس والقمر. And I said that it's not, didn't say that it's the earth and the sun. I said it's the moon and the sun. And the Quran says وَجُمِعَ الشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ. The Quran reads when the moon and the sun will be collected together, will be joined together. And science has proved today that the moon is drifting away from the earth at the rate of 3 to 4 centimeters per year. And logic would say that definitely time will come when the sun will swallow the moon. And for the Quran, a book revealed more than 14 centuries ago, to spell that out before man reached it with 1400 years is a testimony that the Quran cannot be the word of man. It's the divine word in its divine purity. Nah.
Jadi jelas ya, ada sahabat di Riau bahwa yang disebut oleh profesor adalah fakta antara matahari dan bulan pada hari kiamat nanti akan bergabung. Wajumi as-samsu wal qamar. Jadi bukan antara matahari dan bumi. Terima kasih. Baik, other question? Yeah, please. Fadal.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Saya Fatoni dari majalah Sharing. Menarik sekali tema yang diangkat pada kesempatan kali ini. Yang ingin saya tanyakan adalah bagaimana Bapak mengekstrak pengetahuan ini dari Al-Quran. Ini kita bicara metodologi ya Pak ya, bicara metodologi sehingga bisa muncul kaitan bahwa Al-Quran itu betul-betul menjelaskan tentang seluruh isi alam semesta ini, dan adakah kaitannya dengan gerakan islamisasi pengetahuan seperti itu Pak? Terima kasih.
Allah terjemah.
Pergerakan apa tadi? Pergerakan Islam?
ما هو المنهج في قراءة القرآن بهذه النظريات يا بروفيسور؟ وهل هذا فيه علاقة بحركة أسلمة المعرفة؟ حركة تكم هذا؟ حركة أسلمة المعرفة، هل يعني إيجاز العلم في القرآن هل هناك علاقة بأسلمة المعرفة؟ شكرا.
First of all, I would like to emphasize the fact that in 1974, I was invited to attend a conference in Riyadh with the title of the first international conference in the area of science and technology. And I was asked to speak about mineral wealth in the Muslim world. And after I prepared the article, I found that it's far below the standard of a conference of that kind. This was the largest Islamic conference ever held. More than 2,000 Muslim scholars from all over the world attended that conference. So Allah gave me the insight to speak about the necessity of Islamizing acquired knowledge. See, the need to Islamize the acquired knowledge. Simply because the current civilization started with the divorce with the church. And of course they reflected that on all religions. So we are living in a purely materialistic world that defies creation, that disregards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completely, and try to live with human standards. And that's why many of the great scientific conclusions are misquoted and misrepresented. And of course they were shaped in the style of the time to deny anything beyond the domain of the observed and the seen, anything that cannot be touched by hand and senses. And that's why they deny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They deny creation. They deny resurrection. They deny accountability and judgment. And this is one of the main reasons of the unhappiness of our universe. And that's why I have always been calling for the necessity of Islamizing the acquired knowledge. The acquired knowledge is a great treasure. And if this treasure remains in the hands of unbelievers and associators, they will misuse it. They will destroy the whole world by it, as we have seen around us, you see. The greatest crime in the 20th century is the bombardment of Hiroshima and Nagasaki by the atomic bombs. And really, this is the greatest crime of the 20th century. The invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, the occupation of Palestine. And this is the mere product of material power with no fear of Allah. Material power with no knowledge of ad-din as-sahih. And that's why I say I have been calling since 1974 up till now, calling for the necessity of the Islamization of the acquired knowledge, because the acquired knowledge, although very important and very valuable, has been misrepresented and misfigured. And the only people who can reshape it properly are Muslims and Muslim scholars, you see. So really this is something different from what I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with the scientific commentary and explanation of cosmic verses in the Quran and Sunnah. And both fields integrate and they complete each other. And that's why I have always been saying that we Muslims need three basic areas. The first one is Islamization of knowledge, or acquired knowledge. The second one, concentration on the importance and the precision of cosmic verses in Quran and Sunnah. Thirdly, the role of early Muslim scholars in the development of knowledge. Yani every Islamic university, every Islamic college, every Islamic school need these three basic areas. And unless we indulge into these three basic areas, we'll be kept out the domain of knowledge, you see. Islamization of knowledge, emphasizing the scientific precision of Quran and Sunnah, and enhancing the role of Muslim scholars in the early stages of the Islamic civilization.
شكرا الله يبارك. Other question, please.
Nama saya Suhail dari UI. Yang tadi disampaikan Pak Profesor bahwa khususnya yang terbaru ya, yang saya sampaikan bahwa ada 3 poin penting yang saya tangkap ya. Dan salah satu yang disebut adalah yaitu meningkatkan ya atau enhancing the role of
scholar.
Muslim scholar. Pertanyaannya adalah sesudah kita memahami ini dan pembahasan-pembahasan yang lain menurut yang berbasis dengan Quran, insya Allah kita paham dan semakin yakin mengenai kebenaran Al-Quran. Jadi pertanyaan saya adalah bagaimana pandangan dari Profesor untuk mewujudkan apa yang tadi disebutkan, khususnya yang ketiga itu? Apakah ini semata-mata urusan dunia pendidikan atau katakanlah yang perlu atau berkecimpung di aspek seperti studi pendidikan ini, atau bagaimana sehingga ini benar-benar terrealisasi? Setahu saya konferensi demi konferensi para Muslim sekolah itu sudah sering berlangsung ya, dan beberapa catatan juga sudah direkomendasikan, tetapi mungkin realisasinya belum bisa dirasakan secara konkret oleh umat. Padahal kita punya Al-Quran yang mulia dan sudah tadi disampaikan lagi.
Pertanyaannya kita tangkap, oke? Ya. Silakan Aziza.
كيف الوسيلة لأن نحسن دور المسلم، لأن عملنا المؤتمرات كثيرة ولكن لم نحصل عليه. اتفضل.
طبعا القرارات sorry you see
مؤتمرات
okay. I'm always used to speak in Arabic. You see really the main decisions in any society are outside the hands of scholars. Sadly enough, we do research, we instruct people, we speak quite a lot, but we have no power. The power is within the hands of the ruling parties. And unless we educate those ruling parties, will be left behind. And unless we choose our ruling parties properly, we don't go to the election on the basis of racial gatherings or political parties, or we have to choose the best of our community to lead us. And unless we choose the best, we will always be left behind, because they are the people with the power. And without power, you cannot do any change. Okay. So I agree with the brother. We have held many conferences, we have held many meetings. Well, unless you find the power to execute these recommendations, we will be left behind.
Jadi para intelektual harus berkuasa, Mas. Harus pegang kekuasaan. Nanti Mas jadi presiden aja. Amin. I will take the question from ladies. Yeah, one lady, please.
Thanks for the opportunity, sir. I want to ask your opinion about the Stephen Hawking theory. The newest one is about the black hole. In the end, he said that there is no God to create this universe. It just happened. What do you think about this and the difference with the Quran? Thank you.
Okay.
صحافي؟ أي صحافي؟ Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking.
Hi. I was asked this question several times in this country, and I dare say that Stephen Hawking is a good mathematician. He's a good mathematician, but he's a crazy man. Really, he's a crazy man. He is unbalanced man. He changes his ideas repeatedly, and in some of his previous books, he has written beautifully about the power of the Creator. And in one of his books, I was quoting it to His Excellency the Ambassador and the colleagues this morning. He said, nowadays we have ample evidence to support the fact that our universe was created by a big bang, by an explosion. And he say the nature of the explosion is to scatter things randomly without any order. But an explosion that would build such a wonderful universe that is very precise in masses, in densities, in distances, in speeds, of rotation and of running in orbits. So this cannot be chaotic. This cannot be the product of an accident or a chance. It must be a carefully planned universe. And only a few months ago, he came out with the grand design, denying this completely. And this is a reflection of his unbalanced nature. He is a handicapped man with great intelligence. Really, he is very intelligent. But of course, he has no religion. He has no belief. And of course, he's trying to accord with the norm of the society. No more than that.
Okay. Maybe other question? No,
yes,
other person.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Lady. I'm sorry. Ya.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Saya ingin melanjutkan pertanyaan Bapak siapa tadi? Pak Koni. Tadi disebutkan bahwa tadi tentang metodologi ya. Metodologi yang perlu dilakukan oleh para ilmuwan muslim. Saat ini kan pada faktanya setiap orang yang anti-Islam itu alergi dengan jika dikemukakan pendapat tentang Quran gitu. Nah, untuk meyakinkan mereka, apakah cara yang terbaik itu seperti apa? Apakah harus menampilkan Qurannya dibandingkan dengan bukti ilmiah atau seperti apa? Karena kalau langsung disebutkan ayat-ayat Quran, mereka pasti akan langsung menghindar gitu.
Oke. تفضلي أستاذة نور عزيزة ترجميها.
هذا استمرار من سؤال اسمه توني. ما هو المنهج الذي لابد أن يعمل المسلم في ناس لا يحبون الإسلام.
نعم.
كيف نوثقهم لأن يوثق الإسلام؟ يعني كيف طريقه وكيف المنهج؟ تفضل.
منهاج الدعوة يعني كيف ندعو غير المسلم.
كيف نقنع الآخرين بالقرآن.
كيف
نقنع الآخرين بالقرآن.
نعم.
خاصة الذين لم يتلقوا القرآن
نعم.
يعني عن قناعة.
نعم. You see, all what I have been doing for the last 50 years or so is trying to emphasize the scientific precision in the glorious Quran. Why? Because we are living in an era of scientific development. People always ask about the scientific proof. If I ask people to believe in God, they say, give me the scientific proof. To believe in His angels, give me the scientific proof. To believe in a revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the guidance of man, give me the scientific proof. Resurrection after death, accountability, judgment, eternity in life to come, paradise and hell, they need the scientific proof. And as I said at the beginning of my talk, religion is a divine guidance to man in areas that cannot be correctly addressed by man. And to support these areas, Allah has placed in the glorious Quran many of these scientific facts. And these scientific facts that can be tested by man can be used as a criterion to assess the correctness of the unseen knowledge in the Quran and in the Sunnah. So to give the Quran to people of our time, especially scientists, I have to give them the scientific proof of these scientific notions in Quran, and then I will talk to them about the message of Islam, believing in one God, exalting that God above all His creation, worshipping that God alone without parallels, partners or similars, exalting that God above all His creation, obeying His instructions and orders, believing in the unseen knowledge He has given to us. And that is the way, you see. Without doing this, I cannot really debate with people.
شكرا فضيلة الأستاذ. ونعطي السؤال الأخير لجامعة ريau. تفضل. Untuk pertanyaan terakhir saya berikan kepada kawan-kawan di Riau. Mungkin masih ada yang mau menyampaikan pertanyaan. Dipersilakan. I give this question to the audience from University of Riau in Sumatra. Please.
Where is the one who was asking?
No question? Shukran. Ladies and gentlemen, we will finish after several minutes, and let now listen to the closing remark from head of the Middle East and Islamic Studies Program, Pasca Program, Universitas Indonesia, Profesor Dr. Reni. Fadl.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dear colleague, Professor Dr. Zakir Al-Najjar, I really speechless because I think it's very great to hear your presentation, your lecture, and open our eyes about the relation of Quran and science. And thanks again. Thank you very much for your coming and for the marvelous lecture. Big applause for him. And for Mr. Ambassador, Egypt, Republic of Arab. Thank you very much. And this is program is show our brother, and it's convinced us that you really appreciate and what is in English greater concern about our education in Indonesia, and we are waiting for another lecture from the scholar of Egypt. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
نشكر فضيلة الأستاذة الدكتورة ليديا فرياني هوادي. وفي الختام نشكر مرة أخرى الأستاذ الدكتور زل النجار على محاضرته، ومعالي السفير جمهورية مصر العربية والسلك الدبلوماسي من السفارة المصرية في إندونيسيا والضيوف الآخرين وجميع الحاضرين والحاضرات في هذه اللقاء المبارك إن شاء الله. وشكرا لكم مرة أخرى على حسن استماعكم وانتباهكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.